I recently published a book that asked if God created the universe. It caused something of a stir. I don't think the human race has a moral obligation to learn about space, but it would be foolish and short-sighted not to do so. It may hold the key to our survival. I see great dangers for the human race.
But Professor Hawking also did much to popularise science, playing himself in Star Trek,
Recessed in the opposite direction.
and The Simpsons. In 2014, his life and romance with wife Jane Wilde was depicted on the big screen in the acclaimed film The Theory of Everything.
I hope I will be remembered for my work on black holes and the origin of the universe, not for things like appearing on The Simpsons. After my expectations had been reduced to zero, every new day became a bonus, and I began to appreciate everything I did have. While there's life, there is hope. Religion has been a force for evil throughout history. Religion is supposed to make people behave for fear of the hereafter, but this doesn't seem to have deterred people in the past. I think the conventional afterlife is a fairy tale for people afraid of the dark. One can't prove that there wasn't a creator. All one can do is offer a more reasonable explanation, based on science. Ever since the Greeks, we have managed to explain what previously seemed acts of God in terms of scientific laws.
Can you prove that God does not exist, or just that the universe could have been created without one?
One can't prove that God doesn't exist, but science makes God unnecessary.
Why do so many human beings seem to need a God?
People want to think there is something they can relate to, and which can make them feel they are not isolated, but are part of the larger whole.
Hawking has no need for a God.
If you accept, as I do, that the laws of nature are fixed, then it doesn't take long to ask, what role is there for God? This is a big part of the contradiction between science and religion. And although my views have recently made headlines, it is actually an ancient conflict.
Said you do not believe in God. Do you have a philosophy of life that helps you?
It is clear that we are just an advanced breed of primates on a minor planet, orbiting around a very average star in the outer suburb of one among 100 billion galaxies. But ever since the dawn of civilization, people have craved for an understanding of the underlying order of the world. There ought to be something very special about the boundary conditions of the universe. And what can be more special than that there is no boundary?
You said that if scientists were to discover a complete theory, then we would know the mind of God. But is there really room for God in your concept of the universe? What do you personally believe?
I use God as a metaphor for the laws that govern the universe. So when I say we will know the mind of God, I mean we will understand the universe completely.
You read A Brief History of Time?
No, I haven't. I bought A Brief History of Time, and I started to read it. I think I'd read about 8, 10, 12 pages, something like that. And I thought, this is hard going. I thought, A Brief History of Time is the sort of book that every well-educated household should have on their coffee table, but no one should feel the need to read it. Rather like the Bible.
Like the Bible.
I want to read for you what David Berlinski says about the scientific naturalistic worldview. Do you know who he is? No. One of the world's leading physicists who is an agnostic, borders on atheism, but took issue with Richard Dawkins's book, The God Delusion, and wrote a book called The Devil's Delusion. Here's what he said. Has anyone ever provided proof for God's inexistence? Not even close. Has quantum cosmology explained the emergence of the universe or why it is here? Not even close. Have the sciences explained why our universe seems to be fine-tuned to allow for the existence of life? Not even close. This is Berlinski talking. Are physicists and biologists willing to believe in anything as long as it is not enough, not religious thought? Close enough. Has rationalism and moral thought provided us with an understanding of what is good, what is right, and what is moral? Not close enough. Has secularism in the terrible 20th century been a force for good? Not even close to being close. Is there a narrow and oppressive orthodoxy of thought and opinion within the sciences? Close enough. Does anything in the sciences or in their philosophy justify the claim that religious belief is irrational? Not even in the ballpark. Is scientific atheism a frivolous exercise in intellectual contempt? Dead on. At Cambridge, I listened to a talk at the Lady Mitchell Hall in 1990 by Stephen Hawking. As you know, he can't speak. He uses a speech synthesizer. His whole talk was on determinism and freedom. And you know what he concluded? That the tragedy with scientific materialism, if we take its assumptions, is that we are not free, we are totally determined. That was the world's leading physicist at that time saying, the very thing you're asking of the Christian faith, he pinned on your backs. And he said, the only escape I have is since I don't know what has been determined, I may as well not be. The whole auditorium moaned and groaned with an escape hatch that he gave for himself after telling us that we were completely determined.
We are each free to believe what we want, and it's my view that the simplest explanation is, there is no God. No one created the universe, and no one directs our fate. This leads me to a profound realization. There is probably no heaven, and no afterlife either.
You could hardly find two less likely debating partners. One of the most famous scientists on the planet, and a boy from Nebraska who turns 12 tomorrow. On one side, the physicist Stephen Hawking, who provoked a firestorm recently when he said that heaven is a fairy story for people who are afraid of the dark. He went on to say, I regard the brain as a computer which will stop working when its components fail. There is no heaven or afterlife for broken down computers. On the other side, young Colton Burpo, who says he knows heaven is real because he's been there.
I got to see Jesus and two of the apostles, Peter and John.
He says this happened at age 4 when, nearing death, he underwent emergency surgery. He says when his son came to, he knew things that he'd never been told, including that his mother had had a miscarriage.
And that day that my son described to me my daughter that I have waiting for me in heaven, it was an incredible day.
And Colton's reaction to Hawking?
I'll say that I can believe what I can believe, and if you don't believe it, okay.
Stephen Hawking may have written more books and may have many more advanced degrees than young Colton, but here in this country at least, it's more than likely that the winner of the debate would be the 12-year-old. While there is some disagreement among Americans about whether heaven is a purely spiritual setting or an actual physical place, the bottom line is roughly 3/4 of us agree with Colton that heaven is real.
Science measures things that are visible, that are measurable, and because it does, it starts to assume that that's all that exists.
As one person told us today, this debate brings to mind that line from Isaiah, "A child shall lead them."